Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mara Weinraub of The Kitchen and Jason Buechel of Whole Foods Market.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I think we are the final talk before closing remarks, so we're gonna do our best, close it out with a good one, some energy, and a really exciting conversation, one I was excited to be a part of. We're talking about shaping industry standards for the global food system. And before we get into, talking about suppliers and sustainable farming and all that stuff, I'd just love for people to hear about your connection to food.
Thanks, Mara. Well, I have a really deep-rooted connection to food. I've been gardening since I was about 7. That was a big part of my life growing up. Both of my grandparents on both sides were dairy farmers, so we spent a lot of time out on the 2 dairy farms, especially on my mother's side. And my dad was a cheesemaker before retiring, so very deep-rooted connections with food. And so for me, I've always, seen growing up in rural Wisconsin the connection that our farmers have to our food systems. And it's just been, a really amazing journey for me to be in a space right now where I can be an advocate and help support our future food systems.
That's amazing. Ugh, I can't imagine being able to grow up with a cheesemaker. It's a dream.
It was, yes.
Dream come true.
Very, very fortunate.
So we're talking about shaping industry standards today, and for people who might not be so familiar, I'd love to start with, before we talk about where we want to be, like where we are right now. So can you talk a little bit about what the industry standards are today?
Well, our food systems across the U.S., I'd say there really aren't a lot of standards overall. I mean, that's, I think, one of the reasons why Whole Foods Market has thrived the way that we have, is we've really tried to create those and try to set the standards overall. The barrier to entry is actually really, really low. And that's why we've done a lot of work as far as placing, over 270 banned products in our consumable products, why we've basically have helped create our animal welfare standards, not just for us, but trying to set industry standards. The same thing took place with, cage-free eggs, sustainable seafood sourcing. So ultimately, one of our goals is try to help, raise the bar so we can have some standards to play with.
Yes, I have to admit that was a little bit of a trick, not a trick question, but a loaded one, because I know that there is a lack of standards as it stands today. So I'd love to talk a little bit first about what you're hearing from consumers about what kind of standards they're looking for, and then which of those would you like the entire industry to adopt? Like, what are the top 3 priorities that we'd love to get to ASAP, I'll say?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that we benefit from right now is consumer awareness around the importance of standards is increasing. And especially as we start to look at our younger generations, I have a lot of optimism as far as where we're going to be 10, 20, and 30 years from now, because the demands of what we're going to need to do as retailers and as consumer goods companies, as well as all the way back to the farmers, it's going to help elevate the standards that we know today. If we look at what customers are most importantly looking for, products that help support sustainability in the environment, animal welfare standards that are helping protect our waterways, and ultimately, having us elevate standards that, ensure that products that are really not good for our bodies, are not in our food systems overall. If I were to wave a magic wand, the first area that I would have us focus on as an industry is climate-friendly agriculture. And this isn't just because this is something consumers are looking for and interested in. We need this ultimately so we can ensure our food systems for future generations. If you take something like regenerative agriculture, something that we're really trying to champion right now across our supplier base, as well as talking in a broader form in using sort of our megaphone to help connect all the different stakeholders, and the importance, if we don't do this work now, our topsoil is not going to have the nutrient density it needs to grow the foods that we know and love today in future generations. Mm-hmm. So, that'd be my sort of first ask. The second one is, helping support our local food systems. This is something that's really important for Whole Foods Market. ever since we opened our first store in 1980, and we continue to champion that work and helping create a thriving local environment. We've got foragers across all of our geographies, and I would love to see this across the broader industry. There's so many benefits to this overall. Not only does it help support local communities, but it helps reduce food miles and other waste that we see in our systems. And the last area, I would say is around transparency. And I think this can be sort of a win-win. One, this is something that consumers are looking for. They want to understand where their product was grown. They want to understand all aspects across the supply chain of how this product was grown and all the different conditions by which it was grown and the different supporting stakeholders, the roles that they've played. This is something that we've definitely heard from our customers and wanting more. It's helped us create some new standards in this space as well. Source for Good is one of the areas that we've done this in, where we help look at products and not only ensure that they're supporting the environment, but they're supporting worker conditions as well as the communities. I've had an opportunity to visit several suppliers in the space. Earth University is one that I visited earlier this year in Costa Rica. And when you can get a hands-on appreciation, not only for the care of the products that are being grown and produced, but understanding directly and hearing from the local community and the workers for the experience they've had in the process and how it's helped elevate and created a ripple effect in the entire region, like that's exciting. And so I would love to see sort of these three areas become more of industry standards. Folks oftentimes ask the question to me, when I talk about that, like, what's your differentiation then? And for me, it's like, we just keep raising the standards, because if we sort of set the tone, others will follow the same way we did with introducing, organic and really trying to help shepherd that to become sort of a mainstream offering here in the U.S.
Yeah, that's amazing. Let's start with the regenerative agriculture, because that's sort of become a buzz phrase for lack of, phrasing that I can think of right now. It's, and it's obviously something that has been going on for centuries and centuries. So can you share with people what is regenerative agriculture and what consumers tend to think of it? Because I feel like it's a little bit fuzzy in the same way like a word like healthy or local can be.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely one of the top buzzwords that we have in food right now. The way that I like to think about it, it's really trying to look at our topsoil and over our entire ecosystem within the food space and saying, how do we get it in a space where not only is it sustainable and helping support and has the nutrient density it needs to grow the food and products that we've always known and loved, but ultimately it's helping harmonize and support the broader systems as well. And so it really starts in the soil itself. And one of the challenges happen in sort of the industrial model for growing food. We've ultimately depleted our soil from these nutrients, and we've ultimately significantly impacted all the different biodiversity that is situated within our soil. And so the regenerative is really about taking practices that not only help replenish, but ultimately make things sustainable, so we're not having to continue to repeat these steps again and again. And so our hope is, in working with suppliers who really want to help support this work, how do we remove some of the barriers that can be really tricky? And part of this work involves making sure that folks have the land and the capital and the resources and the support to help create these ecosystems that can support regenerative.
Oh, that's a great segue into my next question. I wanted to hear a little bit about what are you hearing from the folks on the ground who are growing our food? What are the obstacles that they're facing? What sort of support do they need, and where can they get it?
Yeah, it's a great question. It kind of depends upon the type of supplier. I'll say for a lot of smaller local suppliers, ultimately it is access to capital. Like, we're in a tough space right now when you look at where interest rates are at and the affordability of what these smaller businesses are able to do. And quite frankly, they're seen some cases as very risky businesses because yields can vary year to year, weather conditions can ultimately interrupt and disrupt their supply chains. And so for them, it's making sure they have access to the capital and the resources, whether it is equipment or ultimately workforce, so they can actually do this great work. I think the other part of it is making sure that there's the right incentives in place as well. And in some cases, there are incentives almost to go backwards, to not support some of this work because there's temporary needs in certain product commodities that ultimately have some of these farmers question, what do I do over this next crop? Like, what's the best answer for my family short term? And I think we need to figure out a way that we've got a balanced set of incentives that are helping ensuring we're doing the work we need to over the long term.
Who do we need in the room to help sort of rejigger those incentives, and how do we get them in that room?
Yeah, we need a lot of folks. I mean, we obviously need our farmers, our ranchers. We need our consumer goods companies that are helping create goods out of these. We need retailers. We need the government, both at a federal level as well as a state and local level as well. And I think we need, folks that can help be disruptors into this space. Different technology and folks that can help provide ways that we can give both the resources and tooling to our farmers to help support this work in an easier way.
Can you give an example of what either a disruptor, whether it's a tech person, company, or otherwise, that could sort of help move this along? Because those are a lot of people that we need in that one room to have this conversation, and it makes me a little nervous that it's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, it is a lot of stakeholders, and in some cases it's probably not everybody all in the room at the same time, but it's figuring out how do you create connective tissue between all these. I mean, some of the areas, I think on the equipment side of things, it's figuring out ways that we can provide more cost-effective equipment, especially going to local and smaller farmers. One of the things that's happening on the as things have become more industrialized is, different equipment isn't necessarily built at scale to support some of these smaller growers. There's also a lot of great technology that's happening in the area, like, take cameras as an example, being able to detect and understand like where there might be challenges in certain crops, and being able to help make adjustments for farmers. So I think there's a lot of ways by which we're going to be able to provide better resourcing that'll help improve yields and make practicing some of these methods even more lucrative, which ultimately is going to help support farmers moving in this direction overall.
Right, they just need the funding to get those tools and such.
Correct.
Yes, okay. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about the local piece of things, and where I know Whole Foods does a great job of working with different local suppliers. Are you building that out even more? Are you seeing other retailers start to build that out? I feel like we saw a little bit of that during the pandemic because of supply chains and all this stuff, that they were relying on smaller purveyors and suppliers. How's that going, and what are you seeing progress being made there?
Yeah, I mean, for us, this is a really important part of our culture. One, we obviously love supporting our local communities, and that's been an important part of our company since we opened our very first store, and will continue. We currently have over 3,000 local suppliers. We want to be able to continue to grow that business. I mentioned earlier, some of the benefits. I mean, we can reduce food miles as well. Ultimately, a lot of these methods help reduce food waste as we reduce food miles and the amount of transportation that particular food has to go through. But quite frankly, the product's fresher for consumers as well when we can lean in on local. So for us, this is something that we want to continue to support as we go forward. And quite frankly, this is interest of our customers as well. Especially when you're shopping our produce aisles, this is something where our customers want to see what's being grown locally right now, what's available for me. I would say it's not a huge industry trend at this point, overall. In a lot of cases, this is something that is not easy to support, in a broader system when you think about the complexities of doing this across every single geography. But, we feel it's really important to make that investment as part of our core values and culture.
Yeah, a lot of logistics involved in that.
Absolutely.
Pause that, and I don't have a ton of this, so I also want to touch on transparency, which is the third thing you said. And as someone who writes about groceries all the time, I still find it confusing. There's a whole melange of phrases. So I'd love to talk a little bit about how do we build on that transparency and also make it crystal clear for consumers who are shopping what things mean, what they should look for, why it's important. Because sometimes I feel like if you don't know what to ask for, you can't help make the change.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the areas where I do think from a consumer perspective, it can be very complicated because there's so much information. And in a lot of cases, there's not a standard way of looking at it. You know, outside of organic, which is, clearly defined, and there's one, singular certification that we've got here in the US. A lot of cases, that transparency is depending upon what companies are willing to share and how they want to share it for the consumer. So I think one of the things that would be helpful is for us to have some broader standards, for the consumer. And I know in different areas, there's been sort of an ebb and flow, but I think that's something that would be great for all of us. So you have more of a level playing field and understanding. I think also it helps, with some of the challenges where folks try to represent as one thing, but it necessarily may not be the same as what may be elsewhere. I find in areas like animal welfare, sustainable seafood sourcing, even fair trade, like those are, kind of areas where some folks try to make claims or they try to say, here's some stuff that we're doing, but you don't understand, does it apply to all the products? I think it's something we really have to simplify so it's really easy for a customer to understand. And that's something that we've been trying to do, not only in the communication that we provide directly in our stores, but ultimately when customers buy online or use our app to support their shopping experience, how we can convey some of this information in a really simple way. I mentioned, Source for Good a little bit earlier. Part of the reason we created that program was to help support customers in their ease in identifying those specific products where they're like, I don't want to choose one over the other. I want to know what's good for the environment, what's good for the workers, and what's good for the community. And so I think it's sort of a challenge just, for us in the broader industry of how do we make this a lot easier for our customers. And by doing this, it actually is easier for our suppliers in understanding the work that they need to do. And again, and having that broader ripple effect so we can make mass change as we support better ways to support our food systems.
Totally. And so I question, where are you seeing like most of the rub in getting things going or having things move forward? Like where's the roadblock or what's the bottleneck? What's happening?
Well, I think one of the challenges with transparency is inherently doing the work will actually cost more money because as consumers can understand more about how our product's growing, their expectations will likely elevate. And so I do think that that's one area where it's been challenging for folks because they know doing that work is ultimately going to increase, their cost of operating the business likely. And so especially in an environment right now with, high inflation, folks are focused on lowest price points, best value, gravitating towards, why now is the time to open up the transparency, I think does create some of those inherent roadblocks.
Yes, unfortunately. Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up. If for the people out there, whoever, whether they're a stakeholder, a consumer, someone that works at an NGO, someone in our government, what's one thing that they can do to help push along the shaping of these industry standards into the future? What's one thing we can do?
Well, I think it's having influence into the stakeholders that they're most connected with. And acting as an advocate. And so I think if we all are doing our part, and I mentioned earlier, where we're trying to use our megaphone in the stakeholders we have direct connections with, I think as we can create higher standards just overall, and whether it's as Whole Foods or as an industry, we're ultimately going to make the world a better place. And I think if we can all be focused on the longer term, and in our case, it's about nourishing people and the planet. And we want to be able to have our food systems support not only the current generation in the next few decades, but we want to support things over the next centuries. And that's something that I think if we can get folks to realize the work we're doing right now is going to have that impact. And the decisions we make now, whether we do things or decide not to do things, ultimately are going to determine what future generations are going to be able to eat.
Yes, that was well said. I guess my last question is, everyone who's going to go grocery shop tomorrow, next week, whatever, what's the one thing you want them to think about when they're standing in front of the shelves, taking 7 seconds to pick their grocery items?
Well, I think the easiest way to have a positive impact, buy organic is one of the things I say. It's really, clearly marked in stores, no matter where you're going, you understand it. It's, one of the foundational climate-friendly practices that are out there. While you're shopping, see if you can find some things that are certified regenerative. At Whole Foods, you'll find about 350 products today spread across over 70 different suppliers. So continue to sort of help elevate those standards. If you happen to be shopping in a Whole Foods, check out Source for Good, another easy way to pick up those products and help support making sure that purchases that you're making are supporting our future food systems.
Great. Nice. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much.
Did we get up? I think we get up.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Please welcome to the stage Concordia's Caroline Scullin.
Good afternoon. My name is Caroline Scullin, and I'm the Vice Chair of Concordia's Board of Directors. Thank you to Jason Buechel from Whole Foods Markets and Mira Weinraub from The Kitchen for that insightful discussion on creating sustainable food systems, an issue that affects us all and that deserves our attention. On behalf of Concordia, thank you all for your invaluable insights and continuous engagement throughout today. We're immensely proud of the community that we've fostered together and look forward to seeing you all back here tomorrow for our second day and then the next day for our third. The Concordia Annual Summit is the leading nonpartisan convening alongside the UN General Assembly, celebrates the role of cross-cultural, cross-sector collaboration, private-public partnerships, and inclusivity in addressing today's global challenges. Today, through the huge range of conversations, sessions, panels, and more we've been part of, we were reminded of that continually. Thank you to our founding sponsor, Libra, our travel partner, United, and today's partners and sponsors, Calamos Investments, Horizon Therapeutics, BHP, Namibia Investment Promotion and Development Board, Stop TB, Operation Smile, Train Technologies, Treat California, USA for IOM, Rockefeller Foundation, University of Virginia Darden School of Business, and the U.S. Department of State. That's a wrap for day one of the 2023 Concordia Annual Summit. We're returning tomorrow at 8:45 a.m. promptly, and where we're kicking off the day with Governor Kathy Hochul of New York. Thank you all for joining us today.